Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Mike and Jay.
Oh, you're not going to screw it up this time?
I hope you left the first one in.
Oh, okay. Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
I think you should.
Maybe. I don't know.
It just shows Kyle as a human, which isn't something we normally get. So, you know.
Why? Instead of a super tactical droid,
Yeah.
you want to show him as the Anakin Skywalker of Star Wars.
Yeah.
It does not compute.
Yeah. I don't know. Anakin Skywalker's still bad. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, I took a drink immediately before, like during, Mike usually does like a countdown, you know, before the show starts, and then I start talking. I took a drink like in the middle of the countdown, and then it came time for me to start talking, and I had liquid in my mouth. So, Anyway,
Happens, you know.
It does. So we got a lot to talk about today. We're gonna hit Invader briefly because we got our group draws. Mike and I got groups. We are not in the same group. Yes.
Oh, that's good.
That was my bar. That was my expectation bar.
Yeah.
Anything beyond that, I was very excited about. So
Yeah.
We got some, I guess what is officially called an RRG appendix, a new thing apparently. So we'll talk about that briefly. And we got some unit cards for both the Fluttercraft and the DSD-1 spider droid. So we'll talk about those. And then our main topic today is we're going to talk about positioning and deployment in our tactics section, which we haven't done one of those in a while, so we're going to hit that. But first, you guys got some housekeeping for us?
Housekeeping?
Yeah. I think the usual stufferoni. Let's start with Patreon again. Hey, if you want to listen to our After Dark podcast where we deep dive into stuff. We talk about what's going on at the 5th Trooper. We do theory crafting for lists. We sometimes cover unit cards, and Mike and I give our unhindered opinions on things. And then once a month, we do a live Q&A with our Patreon members where you can come on and ask us anything you want and just talk directly to us. And we got one coming up this Thursday at 8. So, you know, any dollar level on the Patreon gets you in. And again, your support, much appreciated, gets all this equipment and servers and all the stuff we need to run the blog and the podcast successfully, which is great. So Patreon, and then Stormtide is rolling. We're a few weeks away from shipping out box 2, which we're really excited about, and it seems like you guys are all excited about. There's been some amazing paint jobs of the 2 commanders I've been seeing in the Discord and Reddit and Facebook groups, so that's been wonderful. Thank you guys for sharing those. And so box 2 is coming out, which Mike and I are both excited and excited. So
No, I'm just at this point, I'm just excited. I'm not exhausted. Jay is exhausted.
I'm exhausted.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I am actually I'm really excited because we've gotten over the first box. Here you go. What does everybody think of it moment? And it seems like people are really into it, which is fantastic because if you like the first box, you're going to love everything that comes after it. So I definitely, as like an author person putting stuff out into the wild, that was definitely like, a scary moment for me personally. And we're over that hump. So, and I'm, it just gets better from there. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm giving you a virtual fist bump.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
so
I'm exhausted.
I know you are. I know you're.
Well, I'm giving you a virtual hug, Jay.
Thanks, pal. Thanks. It's a good exhaustion though. It's just work, right? Like we're just putting a lot of work into this, and you guys are supporting us, which is amazing, which makes me work harder, which makes me more tired as also.
At the end of the day, all of your jobs is to make Jay Shalansky tired.
That's right. Yeah. But thanks to everybody that's been supporting us so far. It's been great, and we're looking forward to delivering even more and better boxes and scenarios, and it's going to be amazing. So I'm really, really excited about it.
We talked about Patreon already. We did.
Yep.
To mention
Yep.
the Q&A. I am going to be attempting to stream again this Invader season.
Okay.
So that's a thing.
Where are
Hopefully
you doing that?
on the Fifth Trooper Twitch.
That's right. We have a Twitch.
That's the plan. As long as Jay gives me the logins, which I asked him for this morning, and he hasn't given me yet. So
Did you directly ask me, or did you just put them in a conversation?
I did. I directly asked you in a conversation between us.
I ignore those mostly.
I know he's exhausted, people. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll get it over to you. We talked about like 30 things today, so
we did.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem.
But that is on the table. So I'm gonna try and do that. I think I have claimed a game this weekend, Saturday, September 4th at 10:30 a.m. Between Ben of Team Relentless and AJST from the Discord. So
nice.
That should be fun, assuming that it works. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure my internet's gonna be able to handle it, but we're gonna find out. So,
I will definitely get you access before 10:30 on Saturday.
Yeah, that's fine.
You will be getting it at 8:30 on Saturday.
Great. Sweet.
10:15.
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll kind of kick in. I did not stream it all last season. But yeah, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, so join us on the Fifth Trooper Twitch for some stream action. We keep trying to get streams going on the Twitch, and hopefully we do this time. We get this one going, it'll be great.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like sometimes there's not a lot of stuff to stream. It's
That's
easier
true.
to stream during Invader season because there's a ton of games going on.
That's true.
But outside of Invader season, the interest, at least in games, is a lot lower, I think, at least for online streaming. So it's kind of a cyclical thing. Anywho, so that's a new development.
Speaking of Invader, why don't we just go into our news segment here?
Welcome to In the News.
So Invader League starts today. We record on Mondays, so that would be the 30th of August. You guys excited?
I have 3 of 5 games scheduled so far.
Wow, I have exactly 1 game scheduled so far, which is tomorrow. So by the time you hear this, it will probably be over. That would be Tuesday.
Yeah, and they're all within 6 days of today.
Oh, nice.
So,
Knocking them out.
Yeah, the round robin phase is something where like I've found that if you don't get them done early, they sometimes become hard to do because
I
don't know. It just some people in the groups don't have as much time later on or whatever, or like interest kind of wanes and it's tougher to schedule as time moves on. So just trying to knock these guys out.
Yeah, that's a word of advice to newer Invader players is you definitely want to just try and crank out as many of those 5 games as you can as early in the schedule as possible. Because weird stuff happens in the last few weeks and you get scheduling conflicts, and then you have to have somebody like resolve who's, like responsible for not being able to play, and like you don't want to deal with any of that. Just get your game scheduled.
Yeah, that's never fun.
So yeah. That's
why we stopped playing Team League, because Mike, the team captain, didn't want to deal with that anymore.
Sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't just you.
We are, as we alluded to, in separate groups. I'm in US 26.
I'm in US 6. Man, that must be a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, it's not the same one this time, so that is an improvement.
It is. My group is interesting. I took a 12-point bid, I think. 12-point bid. And I'm like blue player once, I think. Maybe
yeah,
twice.
that sounds about right.
And Yeah, I don't know. I think that the highest bid in my group is like 30.
Whoa.
Which is honestly, even in the past in round robin, even with formats that kind of reward high bid armies, round robin tends to not have as high a bid as like single elims. But and I don't, this might just be a monster that was created due to the list locking bit, right? Which is very possible. But yeah, people are bidding like crazy. Like my group, I think the average bid is like 17 or 18, and I think it's lower than the average. If I had to guess.
Yeah, I mean, I bid 20, and I think I'll be blue player most of the time, but there's one game where I have a roll off because somebody else bid 20. So
yeah.
And then one of the groups I'm judging, I think it's US2. No, sorry, US1. There's like 3 people with 25-point bids.
Yeah,
and they're all gonna have to roll off. So yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. Definitely indicative of how important your objective deck is in the meta that we live in.
Well,
as well as R2.
Right, I was gonna say how important your deployment deck is, because it's really a secondary objective deck when R2 is involved.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. It looks like you got a nice faction spread in yours. I have a lot of droid players in mine. So,
if by nice faction spread you mean no empire.
Well, yeah, I mean I think you have to assume that.
Oof, Kyle, that's rough beats. Despite the faction spread,
this is a tournament, Mike. Come on.
All of the lists in my group are like pretty different.
Yeah,
there's like a saber tank Padme list, Timbo style. There's an airspeeder speeder truck with no clear thing that goes in the speeder truck except maybe R2, I guess. There's what else is in here? There's a couple other things. Oh, Droid's Rule is playing Lando, R2, 3 Fleet Troopers, 3 Wookiees, and 3 Tauntauns. That's gonna be a joy to play against. Thank you for
it
that.
Makes me like throw up in my mouth a little bit.
It makes me feel way better about playing Kenobi as opposed to Rex.
Yeah.
To be completely honest.
Yeah, laser stick and force push going to be pretty important.
Yeah, there's another guy playing basically your Invader list that you're playing, and the last guy in our pod, I believe, is playing Dooku Maul. Again, glad I took Kenobi.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
I too am glad I took Maul, because there's a lot of like close range stuff also in my group. So
yeah,
and a couple triple stabs.
Glad I sat this one out. So we all got something we're glad about. That's
there
good.
you go. There you go.
Yep. All right. Well, let's. So good luck to everybody playing Invader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Have fun.
May the best person with Kenobi in their army win.
All right. Let's talk about this RG appendix thing.
Yeah,
that was released on Friday. So basically,
which time are you talking?
Yeah, so it was actually edited at least twice.
What a mess.
After being released. Yeah, it was a little bit of a. First, there was like a version of Strategize that was different than what was on the reminder text, and was like, at least on basically didn't make a difference on like Kraken, but on Kalani it was significantly worse because all the tokens went on one unit instead of like on 2 separate units.
Yeah.
And it was completely different than the reminder text. So they ended up fixing that within like 30 minutes of having it released. And then there were a bunch of other like typos and random things.
Yeah. It seems odd from this perspective. I'll say, like, they seem for some reason in a weird rush to do stuff. Like, and this goes along the same lines as that battle report thing that they did. I don't even know if you want to call it an actual battle report, but whatever they did a couple weeks ago, the skirmish game that they played, this felt very similar to that. Like, all right, we're just gonna rush and throw this out, and they did it, and then there's a bunch of things that they didn't even think through or look at, and it just, I don't know. It just with that mini extravaganza or something coming up in a couple weeks, like, why would you rush this out? Why wouldn't you just hold it for that and just put it all out at once? Because I have already said they're doing points and erratas or something at the mini extravaganza. So why wouldn't you just do it all at the same time?
Well, I think Yoda is currently out in like
Oh,
Europe
yeah,
at
over-
He
least.
is. There was a bunch of tournaments where he really laid the smackdown, from what I hear. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that we definitely, given that Yoda has hit shelves in stores and stuff like that, we definitely needed like RRG entries for his abilities and stuff like that. The thing that I don't get is that like there's no way that like they haven't had this for like a year at this point, right? Like as far as like I don't know, like if units take 2 years to be developed and they're literally hitting shelves now, like all of these rules must have been in the pipe for a very long time. And did no one proofread this document before it got released? Because that's what it feels like to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good at least that it was changed quickly. Like clearly it would have been better if it was just right the first time.
Yeah, totally.
But at least there's a feedback cycle, if you will, that was relatively fast. So
Yes, and it seems interesting that, you know, they just put out the 1 page of new updates versus updating the whole RRG. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know.
I think
I'm
this
not
is
a
the first
fan
time
of that.
that we've gotten something like this, right?
I don't think we've ever. Yeah, it's never happened like this. It's usually the RRG with the blue text.
And I mean, at this point, because we haven't gotten a full RRG update with like all of the forum like things that have been answered in the forums, if you have a rules question about Star Wars Legion, you have to go to 3 separate places to
it's
see
kind of like,
if there's an answer.
it's kind of like 40K, where it's like,
Yeah.
Except
I
like,
wish I had a stack of books here, you know. where-
like some
but,
of this stuff
yeah.
is not publicized. Somebody was telling me that you can't actually get to the appendix from the website. I don't know if this is true. I'm kind of spitting out my mouth right now.
Oh, like you can only access it from the tweet link.
Yeah,
Something.
yeah. Like, and I don't
maybe.
know if that's correct. I haven't actually tried it. I'm trying it like right now. Star Wars Q&A. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem apparently obvious how to get to it from their website. If you go to rules, it's all Marvel Crisis Protocol rules. There's no Star Wars rules section. The Star Wars Q&A on their website doesn't say anything. It just says this is where the fun begins, and it's from November 17th, 2020.
Yeah, so it's technically on their website. So the link goes to what is it /SW-docs or something like that. But it's just like it's a weird.
Point being, you have to know it's there.
It's a strange way to do it.
It is.
So
I'm sure they have eventually promised us a website, like a real website. Not that this is not a real website, but it's clearly this is an MCP website.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the holdup is with that. I have to imagine it's licensing because frankly, the website they've got is like a Squarespace site, basically. Which that there's anything wrong.
Not basically. Not basically. It is a Squarespace site.
Yeah. So I'm sure that there's something with LFL that's
there's got to be. It's got to be a licensing issue, or they're just not doing it. I don't know. It's one or the other.
Just real quick, and then we can move on. It's kind of like, so back when it all seemed weird when they made the MCP announcement. Do you remember that at Gen Con, and they did it during the Fantasy Flight preview, like
the existence of MCP?
Yeah, and so like everything that they do Atomic Mass Games and everything that's happened, it's kind of feels like they were this startup shop that like had this idea for a game and then were just thrust into the limelight without there being like any like infrastructure planning or anything done. Where on the contrary, Fantasy Flight was a very large organization, right? That got bought up by Asmodee, but was a very large organization with all these checks and balances. And listen, they didn't do everything right, but like, you know, they had a much better corporate structure, it seemed. And then Atomic Mass Games just seems like more of a like us, like they just seem like a run and gun small shop, right? That's trying to do big boy things and just kind of missing every time they take a swing. So I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not
That's
sure.
a little that's a little harsh, Jay.
That's a deep comparison there.
Yeah.
You know, I actually
Is it?
I'm
You think-
I'm
is it
willing to
harsh?
give. I'm not sure that that's even
That's
a
how many
strikes?
fair assessment. Of
I
the
mean, you get
situation.
it's a swing and a miss. We've got 3 strikes, right? Someone's got to go out. I think
Sure.
someone needs to be
Yeah,
out.
I
That's
mean,
how it works.
At some point, they're still getting their feet under them excuse will stop working.
Yep.
I mean, maybe.
Well, you can't.
Well, clearly it stopped working with me. I'm over it now.
Yeah,
So
I think we're still in that grace period a little bit, personally.
I also think we're like the vast majority of things that the people that listen to this podcast and the people that are on this podcast care about are not like there's a large portion of people that hobby with this game and play this game that everything that's happened doesn't affect it all. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, you know.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
from they're probably not even aware of what's happening. Which is fine. Like that's how the world works. But yeah, I don't know. I think we can probably leave it at that.
okay. Let's leave it at that.
All right. Should we hit some new unit cards?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I
Yeah.
want to make sure I get these
Sure.
right here. Let's.
Make sure you get these right.
Oof.
Jay,
Let's
I just want to have it pulled up in front of me. So
Jay's being his after dark self right now.
Yeah.
He's just like firing on all cylinders. We're like, we're not gonna be that hard on AMG today. And Jay's like pulling
Wrong.
punches from the basement.
All right.
and wrong.
Radoff, Maths, Fluttercraft. I think it's a silent G there.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the second D might be silent too. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Fluttercraft, the Fluttercraft.
The Fluttercraft.
This basically is like a speeder. I mean, it's not like a speeder, it is a speeder. But it's 55 points. It's got a pilot upgrade. I think no, that's not a pilot upgrade. A gunner upgrade. Is that what that's called?
Mhm.
I always forget what this one's called.
Mhm.
And a comms slot, and that's it. 6 health, 3 resilience, surges in both directions, speed 2. It is speeder 2, so it gets a compulsory move, and it can ignore height 2 terrain or lower. Reposition, which makes it super maneuverable. It's got that same keyword slew as the T-47
Yep.
of immune, blast, melee, range 1 weapons, and it has cover 2. So no
Yeah,
armor or
and-
anything, but clearly it has cover.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Godspeed.
I mean, I think it makes sense. They're calling it a repulsor vehicle, even though it's more of a helicopter.
Fluttercraft.
Yeah,
Would you call
more
it a
of
Fluttercraft?
more of a fluttercraft. I was gonna say
It's like
something, I'll just-
it's like a giant dragonfly, Jay.
Yeah.
Basically.
It's cool. Hey, listen, it's all the Wookiee stuff seems really cool. You know? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. So we talked a little bit about this on After Dark, just because the timing of its release. I think the crew or gunner upgrade that is on it is interesting. We could talk about it, I guess, in a second. But
No, let's talk about it because I think it's an important part of the package.
That's fair. All right. So the NASP gunner is range 1 to 3, red, black, fixed rear. So yeah, only shoots backwards. Impact 1, Pierce 1, 25 points. It makes the Fluttercraft 80 points altogether. And the Fluttercraft doesn't have, like, I mean, it's got a pistol, but you're never going to shoot it if you can fire the back gun. And it's got reposition. So chances are you can probably like move, reposition, shoot something. And since you surge to hit, you can probably fire support it with, red, black, Pierce 1, and then fire support that, which on its face doesn't seem terrible. I think you're going to lose your Fluttercraft like 90% of the time after you do that.
Well, it depends, because you can, it depends on terrain. Reposition helps a lot.
It does.
Like, I think you could do some legitimate hit and run stuff with this thing.
Yeah.
I also think that it's more durable than people realize, just because it's like cover 2 goes a long way when you're immune to blast. And then it has 6 health with a surge. So it's not nothing.
No, but it's still like dies to his E6. I don't know. It seems very flimsy for what is essentially an armored vehicle. I do think the price point, the bark is 60. If you take the twin laser gunner at 75, they're roughly the same points. The bark hits harder by itself, I think. So
yeah, I mean, it depends. Like the Pierce is good. I think the bark probably hits harder into white saves, and this thing will hit harder into red saves.
Yeah.
I think it's so if you look at like the Droid speeder bikes or the Empire speeder bikes, like it's kind of missing something. Like it just feels like it's missing something, whether it's firepower or whether it's the ability to like hide one of the minis around a corner so you can't get a full shot on it, or agile, or like there's just these things that the other speeders seem to have over it. And so I don't know, it just feel like, and then having it have we don't know what the other one is, right? There's another gun that they teased on the Asmodee's site, but we don't know what it is yet. But like the fixed rear kind of sucks. Like, I don't know. It just, it seems like maybe there's something where it's gonna work, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I do think that it's an easy trap, I think, to kind of get caught in, to think of this as like a speeder. I don't think you're taking 3 of these. I think you're taking maybe 1, and you're using it as a fire support platform with Pierce.
Yeah.
This is not because you have to basically turn it around to shoot it, whatever it is. I think it does the like hit you with 3 all at the end of the turn thing a lot less good. And I also think that it's harder, because you're playing Republic, to like get enough activations where getting enough speeders in your list is really going to functionally matter to the point where they're safe.
Yeah. The other thing that worries me is the resilience. That's a tough keyword. Like, and you kind of deal with it on armored, like bigger, heavy vehicles. And I guess the ATRTs as well. Like you deal with it because like what you'll be able to do before you hit your resilience will make a lot of, will do a lot. Like you could probably get a few 3, 4, 5 shots off, maybe 3, 4 with any of those other resilience vehicles. But this one seems, and I understand what you're saying, Mike, with the fire support, but it just seems like, I don't know, seems dicey at best. And it seems like it's going to be a tough unit to play, I think, overall.
Yeah, I do. This is a finesse unit.
Yeah.
And it suffers from not having the clone trooper keyword, as most things that don't do. I think that, as a one of in like a clone trooper list, though, it might actually be an interesting tool.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I have, okay, if you want to build a fun list, like I like that you can build a majority Wookiee list, basically, right? You just need 3 core troopers and you can have the rest of your list be Wookiees if you want. That's cool. I don't know functionally though.
I
Well-
do think. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to Mike's point, I think if you're using this thing in a competitive list, I think there is a place for it, for the reasons that you guys have stated kind of already, primarily but the interesting fire support. But I definitely think if you're using it with phase 1s or phase 2s specifically for that fire support and not with Wookiees, as thematic as that is.
Yeah, I think the big question, at least of what we've seen so far, is fire supporting the Fluttercraft that much better than fire supporting an arc strike team? Because fundamentally, they're kind of giving you very similar things in with the Pierce and the ability to deny cover and things like that. You'll probably get in a couple extra hits with the Fluttercraft because its dice are clearly, it's got 4 dice as opposed to 2. But to me, that's the question it's got to answer, and it's also 30 points more than the arc strike team. So it doesn't give your army free aims. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's better than Arcs at Bombing Run.
It definitely is.
Yeah,
not
I
nothing.
think it's that could be really scary. I think any list that has bombing run in it and they can utilize it is terribly.
I mean, I think
awesome.
the other thing though too, sure it has compulsory, but it's only a speed 2.
That's still
Which I
pretty
don't-
fast.
I don't know what the base size is, but
It looked pretty big from the pictures we've seen of it.
yeah, maybe fast then.
I sort of expect it to be about the airspeeder base, I would guess,
Yeah,
based on the
somewhere
pictures.
around there.
because the airspeeder is really not that big of a model either.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and then what else they leak? Oh, hacked comms unit too.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
People were like flipping out about this card. I don't see like a context where you use this where you wouldn't just rather have a comms jammer.
I mostly agree with that assessment.
Like this is too unreliable to be used on a unit that's not going to be like consistently near enemy units that want to receive orders. And if you've got a unit like that, you're talking about like a tauntaun or, a bus, an A5 or something like that. And the jammer is just like a better effect for the same cost.
I mean,
I know.
I'm a strong proponent of the jammer needs to go back to 15 points. But that, I probably something else entirely. Yeah, no, I agree.
Like this feels like it's supposed to be almost like a counter to a comms jammer. And I guess it could function like that, but I don't know. 5 points is a lot to, build for something that you might not even run into. When you could just get like an uplink for a little bit more and have it be useful all the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm underwhelmed.
So
right.
just whelmed then. on
I'm
that
whelmed.
one.
Should we get the spider droid?
The spider.
All right.
Speaking of things that are murderous, like bombing run.
Yeah. So we actually we did not get any weapons for this thing. So
Which seem important.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing basically looks like an ATRT, right?
Mhm.
So, an ATRT is kind of defined by its weapons. Clearly, an ATRT does not have self-destruct.
Okay. I just like looking at the base unit card, assuming that it has access to similar weapons. I'd take a dwarf spider droid over an ATRT 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk. ATRT also notable, not a very popular.
I would
vehicle
also
choice.
like to comment that the ATRT with just a naked guy sitting on top of it has armored, but a metal spider droid has armor 3. Just an interesting little
Armor
tidbit.
X was not a keyword when the ATRT was designed, Jay.
Yeah, well, hey, whatever.
Um,
It's just a naked guy sitting on top of a machine
How do
fully
you know
armored.
there's not like a
he
shield or
has,
something
just
up
to be
there?
clear, he has clothes on.
Yeah. And those are like the Rebel Trooper special issue from Duluth Trading Company. So
Yeah.
that's that's tough stuff.
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
probably made of
mhm,
like fire hose material or something.
mhm,
Um,
mhm, mhm.
anyway, DSD1 dwarf spider droid. Not only is it a spider, it is a dwarf spider.
I never really understood what the whole dwarf thing.
'Cause it's
Well, there's-
smaller than the other one.
Yeah, there's the ginormous one, right? That's
Yeah.
like it's sort of like a War of the Worlds style, like spider droid,
Yep.
Okay, all right,
right?
sure.
Yep.
That's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, they for sure are. I've seen them.
Yeah. Anyway, 55 points. It has a slot with a plus sign on it.
That's that programmed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you must equip a blank upgrade card. I guess it's programmed.
Yeah, you must equip a whatever that is, upgrade card.
Yeah.
So we have no idea what that does. Clearly that could make a difference with how this unit functions.
Yeah.
Because there's no AI on this unit card.
Yeah.
There is a hardpoint upgrade and then a comms upgrade, 6 health, 4 resilience, so exactly the same as an ATRT. Surge hit, surge on defense, which is a little better than an ATRT. It has armor 3 instead of full armor. Otherwise, it's climbing vehicle and expert climber, which is the same as an RT. So, and then that programmed keyword you talked about. Melee is rainbow, red, black, white. And then it has a self-destruct mechanism, which has a new icon next to it. 3 red, blast, impact 1. And then the keyword on the front, on the top is self-destruct 4. And it says if you have at least 4 wound tokens, perform your self-destruct attack. There was some confusion about whether this was mandatory based on that reminder text. It seems pretty clear from the RRG text that it is not mandatory, that you do not have to blow yourself up once you reach 4 wound tokens. I think that'd be a huge liability if you did. Like,
I mean, I'm not sure. Frankly, I think it's like if you are on 4 wound tokens, you want to just like get in there and blow this up in the middle of their army.
you do, but you might not be able to get very far because if you have 4 wound tokens, you have a damage token also probably.
You absolutely have one. Yeah.
Value.
I mean, unless
Right.
you strip it.
Unless
right?
you strip it with a repair
Yeah.
droid.
Yeah,
And then,
I mean,
and then self-destruct is a free action, right? So
Yeah.
you could technically move, boom, move, aim, boom.
If you get 2 actions, you can move, and do it. But it seems
you-
kind of unlikely that you would get 2 actions.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just word to the wise: if you're playing against a dwarf spider droid, if you shoot it, make sure you kill it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kill it all at once.
Kill it with fire, like
Yeah, full to
as
dead.
much as possible. You do not want to leave it on its threshold, on the self-destruct threshold.
Yeah, that's how I treat normal spiders in real life too. Just like kill it with fire and make sure it's dead because I know it's
Yep.
going to come back and hunt me later.
Yeah, I mean,
spiders are helpful, Jay. It's
Yo,
better to have spiders than
that is
mosquitoes.
my one thing, man. The spider, I don't know. They're the worst.
I just usually put them outside if I find them in my house.
I leave them alone unless they get close to me and then
Hmm.
I kills them.
Oh yeah, I mean if it's crawling in your bed or
Yeah,
something, you
yeah.
murder it with extreme prejudice.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, there's like a legitimate situation where if you're just like running triple dwarf spider droid bombing run, you can like walk into your enemy's army and 6 red the whole thing in
Yeah.
1 turn.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like and we know from the card description, we don't know what it does, but we know this thing has access to a flamethrower.
Yep.
So it definitely could be a list concept to just have like triple flame spider droids. You just rush them at your opponent's face, and it's like, hey, you want to shoot me? Yeah, I'll take some wound tokens. That sounds good. Here, oh look, there's 4.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, yeah, you lose the unit, but you probably kill like half your opponent's army.
Well, that's the thing, you know. yeah, this is a bombing run blast, and it's not a small thing, and it's worth noting that when it blows up, it's really like range 2, as opposed. I mean, like, because you're measuring out from the base of this thing that is presumably on a base similar to the ATRT, right? So it's like it's got a much wider detonation profile than a standard mine.
Yep. Yeah, and 3 red with blast is no joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but a full disclosure, I bought 3 of these.
I mean, like, assuming that the weapon options are anywhere close to good, these kind of like, I'm looking at Droidekas thinking, why would I ever take these if these are on the menu? I don't know.
I mean, Dekas are still tougher probably because of the shields and because you can usually get them cover.
Sure.
But they don't blow up, so
they don't blow up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. The upside of going, like, hitting the self-destruct jackpot seems worth it.
Yeah, like, it probably doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, it's
just
gonna happen.
Game.
Yeah,
pretty much. I don't know. I mean, that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but probably not far from the truth.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's 4, that definitely is a little bit of a limiter, because you're either going to have that thing where you can only do 1 action. I forget the names of these because I don't play vehicles that often, but damaged, right?
Yep.
You're going to have the thing where it takes 2 actions to do a move. Honestly, the best thing for the self-destruct would be if you get weapon destroyed, because then you can still double move and do it. I guess you could pick the self-destruct mechanism as the weapon, and then it would just be 2 dice instead of 3, but that's still like,
I mean, if your intent is to blow it up at that point, just pick Wicked Kick, right?
No, the attacker picks the weapon that they destroy.
Yeah. Sure. Again, I don't play vehicles. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But even 2 red dice on your whole army with blasts is
still real good.
Yeah, that's explosions basically.
Yeah.
All right, enough of that.
Cool.
All right, main topic.
That wasn't the main topic.
No, let's hit some tactics.
Ooh.
Get ready for advanced tactics.
So we're going to talk today about. We're actually just gonna hit some objective specific deployment strategies, and then we might hit some other positioning type stuff in a future episode. So
yeah.
So let's talk.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah. I mean, how do you guys? We can walk through these objectives individually, one at a time. Clearly this is kind of an abstract topic because there's so many variables here. But yeah, let's just talk through these.
Yeah, when I was kind of like figuring out what we wanted to talk about this week, I guess I was thinking like it's really difficult to talk tactics on a podcast talking about like real in-game situations because like it's always different, deployment is a little bit easier to talk about, I think, because generally, it's also always different because terrain and yada yada yada, but there are some like good rules to live by when it comes to how you deploy for certain objectives. Let's just run through, I guess, each of the objectives and how each of us approaches them. I don't think we want to really, at least in this section, talk about like deployment breaking rules abilities, though we can mention some if we think it's extremely relevant. But why don't we start with hostage exchange? I think it's an interesting. It's probably a pretty simple one, I think, as far as deployment strategy is concerned. Clearly you deploy. So my take on this is you pretty much always move the enemy hostage unit as close to your army as you possibly can when you set up, right? And then you pretty much have to deploy as close to it with your army is possible for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, there's one caveat with all of these, which is that you don't generally want to give your opponent free shots if you can help it.
Yes.
But especially for something like hostage, which has a chance to be very fast moving very quickly, you also don't want your guys to be like too far away from the action. So yeah, you have to balance that a little bit. Ideally, there's like a line of sight blocker somewhere like right on the edge of your deployment that you can kind of put most of your dudes behind, still close to the enemy hostage, but not in a position where they're just going to get blasted on the first turn if your opponent has like long range weapons or something like that. One little trick when you're deploying your opponent's hostage is you have to kind of remember that like they can shoot you. So I usually drop if that unit has a heavy weapon in it, I usually drop the heavy weapon like behind a line of sight blocker where he can't see any of my units, even if the rest of the unit can, just so that they can't like immediately take an effective shot on your army. Like clearly they could still move and then do it, but that's potentially less effective than just, you know, being in the middle of your army and shooting something. It's especially true if it's a unit like V2s that have a strong close range attack or something like that. So
sounds like somebody's talking from experience.
yeah. I mean, I play hostage a lot and I run B2s with HA specifically for that purpose. So yes, I have plastered a unit on turn one with my B2 hostage unit, knowing that I also run Maul and that he will be able to catch my opponent's hostage unit. So yeah.
Yeah, what's your view on characters for the hostage unit?
What do you mean?
Like a character to get the hostage versus like giving it to a core unit or something.
Well, you're obligated to give it to a core unit at the start of the
that's
game.
Right. That's right. I forgot about that.
But clearly, like a resilient character is a good candidate to pick it up if you ever lose it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why one primary reason why force users are so good at hostage exchange is because they're durable and they have lots of abilities that can move units. So
yeah, I don't think hostage is like super complicated as far as kind of how to set up for it. It's immediately going to devolve into a bit of
slugfest
a cluster,
yeah.
Right? Like that's just kind of how it goes. Or one person runs away with the game. It's kind of one of the two.
Yeah. I think we can kind of hit these deployment keywords as we're walking through these objectives.
Sure. Yeah.
For hostage with infiltrate specifically, you have to kind of keep in mind that your opponent's hostage is going to zone a significant portion of the area that you would normally be infiltrating in. I find myself often just like deploying infiltrators in my deployment zone on hostage exchange.
Infiltrate's basically worthless. I mean, maybe not totally, but it's pretty close to worthless on hostage exchange. If you're running hostage exchange in your deck, you probably shouldn't be counting on infiltrating, at least when you're playing hostage exchange. So
right.
keep that in mind. It's also worth noting hostage exchange is very low scoring. So units like R2 and Padme and people with bounty greatly change how the game is played. Secret mission maybe more so than the other two, just because the main kerfuffle is happening in the middle of the battlefield generally, because that's where the hostages are set up. And generally, R2 or Padme is like skirting around the edges of the battlefield to score a secret mission. So all of a sudden, and you're going to find that with most of these objective deployments, is that those units kind of break up the battle and force two focal points as opposed to one. But you definitely have to be cognizant of when you're deploying, if they've got R2 or are infiltrating with Padme and they, the Padme infiltrate specifically on hostage exchange can be deadly if not accounted for.
Yeah, because especially if you're on battle lines or something, she can just drop like right in your opponent's deployment zone, and then
I've done that before.
Yeah.
it's very, very, very fun for whoever's doing it, not so much for whoever's not.
What? You don't say.
Yeah.
And you can't talk about hostage exchange without talking about scouting party, because it does work on the hostage. where you get basically an extra move before the game starts.
Yeah. I think you've got to be careful with it, just because it generally puts Rex in a very exposed position. So be cognizant of that. If your opponent has scouting party, also be aware that the hostage you place may not end up where you think it's going to end up.
Yep. Yeah, you should probably just try and avoid playing hostage against Rex unless you also have a list that's excellent at hostage, one with like a force user in it. Probably.
It's also important to mention, specifically when you're dealing with that situation and when you're also zoning out your opponent for infiltrate with your hostage unit, right? Or whether, I mean, I guess you're deploying their unit. So if you do have units with infiltrate, or if they have scouting party, how you cohere their unit when you move them is very important. If they have scouting party, you want to cohere all of their models towards you so they can't catch. It's harder. They've got to catch the unit leader specifically with Rex's range 2 level.
If you cohere everything towards you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just a generally good. And anytime you like drop your opponent's unit on the table, unless you have a specific plan for their cohered minis, it's usually just always a good practice to get in the habit of cohering them towards you.
Yeah, easier to shoot because they're, I mean, like clearly you can't shoot this unit on turn 1, but
right.
This is a good thing if you're force pushing and not ending up in melee with the unit, cohere their models towards your guys so that you can shoot them and they can't shoot you, XYZ. Invaders might.
Yep.
There's probably a couple other.
There's a million. Yeah, scatter. Yep. All right, let's hit bombing run.
All right. Fast things good.
Fast things are good on bombing run. That's accurate. I think the biggest thing about bombing run to me is that you need a couple things. First, if your opponent has fast units, you need to be cognizant of the fact that you don't want to take a bomb to the face on your units that's also scoring. It's very important. If you take a bomb to the face, like the Dwarf Spider Droid we were just talking about, the game's probably over. So if your plan is not to move quickly out of your deployment zone, you maybe want to spread out a little bit. Would be suggestion number 1. Suggestion number 2 is drop the units that you think you're going to be carrying your bombs last.
Yep.
That's pretty, I think, fundamentally important. Specifically, if you're the aggressor, bombing run was in your battle deck, you want to drop your speeder bikes or your staps last so that your opponent doesn't have as much response time to your objective bearing units.
And make sure that you leave physical space for the bombs to go.
I know
there's actually 2 considerations here. I've seen it happen where clearly you end up being able to put them somewhere, but this happens more often with the trooper units than with bikes and stuff like that. But they'll drop the trooper unit down, intend to put a bomb on them, and then surround them with other trooper units over the course of deployment. And then there's they can't put the bomb in base to base with the unit leader. The other thing is on advanced positions.
Yeah,
super important.
Yeah.
The bomb has to go on a unit that is within your deployment zone.
Totally, completely within.
Within means entirely within. So make sure that you leave at least 3 units completely within your deployment zone on advanced positions. Do not just scout your whole army forward, or you won't be able to put any bombs on the table. So yeah, please keep that in mind. That is a mistake that you will only make once.
That works with rollout too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it happens less because most people have a bunch of infantry that are stuck in the deployment zone. But yeah.
But
right.
For someone from wanted to use their heavy as and then went rollout and I was like, I'm good. I'm good to deploy it out here.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, don't forget that.
Yeah, and that's a consideration when you're building your battle deck too. Is if the goal of my list is to force bombing run, do I want rollout? Is rollout actually good for me? Which I think is an interesting question sometimes. So
Yeah. I guess it depends. It depends on what else is in your list.
probably
so,
good on every other objective.
Yeah.
Well, and I think if you're not running R2, it almost doesn't matter what your list is. You should probably have rollout in your deck.
That's fair.
I mean, we've kind of talked about this in the past, but generally, I think if you're not running R2, your deck should just be the short edge to short edge deployments, plus maybe hemmed in if you want to swap that in for advanced positions. But like every list that I make that doesn't have R2 in it has rollout, long march, major offensive, and hemmed in it.
Mm.
You just let that little droid scare you so hard, Kyle.
He's crafty.
You're scared of a trash can.
It's a victory point trash can, Mike.
Yeah.
You just kill him.
That's easier when you have fast units than when you play a trooper focused list that has to be close to itself, like I tend to.
No doubt.
You can't just like send a B1 off into the sunset to go chase after R2. That's not usually beneficial for their existence. Especially because the good R2ists usually have their own fast units that can kind of like respond to things that you send after R2 and then kill those things. So anyway, this is not a section about R2.
The classic Kyle, this is not what we're talking about today speech.
I mean, it kind of is what we're talking about because R2 is his own objective, right?
Yeah.
So I guess we can get to him at the end here. But
do you see how I've put him into the objective specific? He's got his own section.
He does. You're right. That's why I said this is not the section for R2.
Okay. All right.
This is not the show for R2. Breakthrough.
So I think that there are a lot of different ways to play a breakthrough. I personally play breakthrough. Breakthrough tends to be a little bit of ships passing in the night, toilet bowl kind of situation for me, more often than not. I think with the meta shifting, that may change a bit. So I think how you deploy for this objective might become a little bit more fluid, but I tend to try and mirror my opponent in breakthrough and then kind of circle around each other and shave a unit off if I can, or a number of units equal to the amount of units I need to win by while we're circling. And I don't really know what more to say about that. This one, I think more so than most of the objectives on this list, is very dependent on terrain and what's in your opponent's army.
Yeah, I would say yours too, because one of my tactics on this one from a double heavy standpoint is if I have blue, I just sit there and I go, okay, go ahead. Try to break through. I just, depending on the deployment too, long march, that's a really nice one for long march, but like, yeah, come on. Go ahead. I got 2 ATSTs, or I got an ATST and a tank. Like, sure, figure it out, and then at the very last minute, ram the tank down their breakthrough with something in it while the ATST's murdering things as it's running towards mine, So I think there's like those are two different tactics with breakthrough, that it just depends on your list and the layout, and it's a lot to that one, but
I mean, it's really kind of two things that you guys both hit on. The first thing I do with breakthrough always is count activations. Because if your opponent has more activations than you need to kill something. Because if you just toilet bowl, you're going to lose, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So if your opponent has more activations than you need to either play like a pure defensive breakthrough, which usually only works on the short edge to short edge deployments, or you need to basically make a plan to just like crash into your opponent's army and have a slugfest.
Yep.
Yeah. I personally do not like I've been bitten many times by I'm going to hold the line and hope they can't get through strategy on breakthrough.
You're taking a risk with that for sure.
Just because what ends up happening inevitably, some amount of the time, not always, is that your opponent gets a unit that can possibly score and you end up with nothing that can even threaten a scoring unit sometimes. And I'm not not saying that happens every time. But all of a sudden you're in a position to not lose as opposed to win. Which is never really a place you want to be. But if you're confident in that play style, it can work. You got to know what you're doing.
And you have to have the right list for it.
Yeah.
I think that's usually, I've done that. But it's usually like a plan B, like my opponent's list is better at breakthrough than mine is. And if I try and run across the table into his deployment zone, either he's going to just toilet bowl around me because he has spears and more activations, or he's going to flank me or something and kill all my dudes anyway. So my best bet is to sit here and, defend the end zone. And it's, clearly I would just rather have a list that's better at breakthrough. But usually situations that end up doing that are a situation that, it ended up in the third slot or something, and I didn't want to play it anyway, but it's kind of like a making the best of a bad situation kind of thing.
Okay.
Otherwise, you should usually plan on trying to have a unit score.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting the units that have deployment breaking abilities are can be particularly good on breakthrough. Infiltrate, particularly on something like advanced positions or, a weird hemmed in situation, can really kind of stick it to your opponent. And you gotta be cognizant of that. If you're playing blue and you're playing breakthrough and you also have an infiltrating unit, if you hold it till last, chances are you can kind of stick it in whatever deployment zone they didn't deploy in and kind of be winning at the start of the game for free.
Yeah, hemmed in is like, if you're ever in a situation where you're blue on hemmed in and you're playing breakthrough, something went weird in that veto phase.
Yeah.
Because, there's basically like blue starts all in one spot and red has to either pick a side or they have to deploy some units in one and some in the other.
Yep.
And if they split, you kind of just like crash into their weaker side with your big force and then you win because you have more activations at that point, probably.
And I do think that speaks to kind of one of the traps of breakthrough is that I see a lot of people be like, I'm going to like split my forces and go around them in two different directions. And what you're really doing is giving your opponent the option to just crush half your army and then move through it into the breakthrough zone. Which is why specifically I was talking about the toilet bowl scenario. You want to keep your army together and break through the majority of the time, because otherwise you end up in a situation where you just get picked apart piecemeal.
Yep, definitely. All right, Sabotage.
Oh, our favorite.
I love Sabotage. I say that completely unironically.
You definitely want blue player with this one.
Well, sure, but let's talk about this.
Well, sure.
The strategies for blue and red are fairly different on this one, so why don't we split this one up?
I also think that this is depending on who you are and how you play this objective. This objective is really two different objectives to some degree. And sometimes you can flex between the two in a given game.
Yep. So if you're blue on Sabotage, really whether you're red or blue, regardless, you have to make the assessment of whether you're going to actually try and tap your opponent's VAPs or whether you're just going to play for points. Now, if you're blue, it's much easier to do the latter because you win points ties, which means that if, each player's respective two VAPs are in positions where they can relatively safely be fully tapped, then you start the game winning because the score starts at 0-0 for points and blue wins if nothing happens, basically. Mm-hmm. But it's possible that as blue, you might sort of make the assessment that your opponent is going to be able to get to one of your VAPs, or they're going to be able to snipe a unit or something based on how your lists match up, based on how the terrain is. Maybe you didn't have like a super safe spot for one of your vaporators. Mm-hmm. And then if that's the case and you have to actually like attack their army, then that has different deployment considerations.
Yep.
Like I've definitely had games. I played an FD cannon in season 4 of Invader League.
Sounds
And
right.
yeah, there were definitely some games on Vaps where I'm like, my opponent has an ATST or my opponent has Death Troopers, and like if they want to kill this FD cannon, they're gonna be able to kill this FD cannon. So even though I'm blue player, like I really need to just I also had Jedi Luke in that list. I really just need to figure out which of my opponent's Vaps Jedi Luke is gonna go own and do that.
Yeah. I guess with this one, and what I meant when I said you really want to be blue player is, as blue player you have more choices,
Totally.
and you get to dictate the choices and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Whereas red player, it's more of, okay, I gotta see what blue's gonna do and then act accordingly, and then try to hopefully outsmart them or out kill, or you know what I mean. There's some other considerations there where you're not fully in control. I guess that's all blue. I guess that's blue player with all things, but this
I
one
do
in particular.
Yeah, I do think like you kind of with vaporators, I think it's important that you do need to understand, and this is kind of why we're talking about deployment specifically, right? And when you're deploying the vaporators as part of that, you should always be trying to pick safe positions for your evaporators, but you also need to be assessing when you're placing your evaporators, if you're going to be playing an aggressive game or if you're going to be playing that defensive game. And if you're playing an aggressive game, I personally end up red on evaporators a lot. That's a thing that just, I also, it's a space that I feel comfortable with. And I tend to deploy at least one of my evaporators kind of towards my opponent so that I don't have to split as many units off to tap my Vaps. Because generally the blue player, most of the time on Vaps, will set up their evaporators in a safe place and try and bunker down, right?
Yep.
That's kind of the game plan. If you're playing Vaps the way you want to be playing it, and if it's in your deck, generally that's how you want to play it. And so because they're doing that, I try to kind of like make it so that I don't have because if as red player you put two evaporators like off in random corner of the board that's not anywhere close to blue player, what ends up happening is your two activations down in the gunfight, and that can be a problem. Particularly this is less of an issue if you have activations that don't do anything, like naked rebel troopers, but if you're playing like a clone army, you want everybody where they can help. And so I tend to be a little bit more aggressive with my evaporator placement. Infiltrate's also very good on evaporators. It allows you to kind of set up cross shots that maybe wouldn't be as open. And I also think my personal favorite is you always want a unit as red player in position, and this starts in deployment, where they can threaten a unit that's on the evaporator turn 1 or turn 2. And they can kill something on the evaporator. Make it so that they have to risk a unit to tap the Vap.
Yeah, and that goes for blue player too, if you can set it up.
Yeah.
Even though as blue player you're not like obligated to kill anything unless your opponent does, it's still sort of a good idea to look for those opportunities anyway. And if your opponent has a Vap that's in a not safe spot, then that's a good opportunity to try and do that. So
that's what I got. Again, all things being equal, R2D2 changes the calculus here pretty dramatically. Although I think less so than you would think, because this is kind of like I'm bunkering down in my deployment zone war. It tends to be sometimes pretty difficult to score with R2 on Vaps.
Yeah, and if you're running Vaps in your deck, you're probably also running the deployments that are bad for R2.
Yeah.
Because you're playing Vaps as a defensive objective if you're running it in your deck most of the time. So, and if that's the case, you're probably running an army that has short edge deployments. All right, should we hit Intercept?
Yep.
Yeah, let's do it.
My favorite thing to recommend with Intercept is don't go for the turn 2.
One of the first lessons you play in Star Wars Legion.
It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Yeah, turn two's a trap.
I mean, unless your opponent gives it to you for free.
Yeah. I mean, and here, so there's two different kind of time. If you're in a timed tournament, it's a much different objective than if you're like not. And the reason I'm saying this, because generally when you're in a time tournament, 5th round is usually what you're going to make it to. And so that scoring round is the round after 4, right? And so really fighting for that final push for 4th and 5th round is where you want to be at, because that's when you're going to be scoring. I think that changes a little bit if you know you're going to play 6 rounds, like if it, if the speed has been good or if it's not a timed game. But yeah, I mean, you really want the 4th, 5th round push. That's what you're looking at, no matter what color.
Yeah, I think the ball intercept can be played in a variety of ways, and this is I guess maybe a little bit of a dynamic one. Generally, what ends up happening is either both players send like one unit to hold the back intercept points, and the armies kind of slug it out over the middle. Depends on the deployment zone how that goes down. Or both armies are sitting on their home intercepts and are fighting over the middle. And I think in the situation where the home intercept points are being held by and you're figuring this out in deployment by like a strike team, there's room for like you to deploy an infiltrate unit to threaten their intercept point, or a STAP unit or whatever. And you need to be kind of cognizant of that in deployment as that's happening and how you're going to play it. If you're going to let their home intercept point kind of be home free, you need to decide it during deployment.
Yep. I think that's the primary. I mean, the other thing is intercept is kind of kill points for like the first 3 to 4 turns. So you do have to be careful that you're not exposing units unnecessarily in your deployment.
Yeah, I find a lot of time, I mean, high level is different, but I find in most tournaments that you're going to go to and play, a lot of people are going to misplay the 2-3 round. And so if you just wait for 4 and you go, okay, I'm going to score on 4, that's what I'm going to focus on, that you can put yourself in a really good position to take out a number of their units while you're pushing up for round 4 scoring. And I mean, that's I know that's an overgeneralization, but that's been most of my experience with it in tournaments.
Yeah, in that situation, you want to make sure that if your opponent tries to score on turn 2, they're putting something out of position to do it.
Yeah.
If your opponent can sort of just safely like consolidate on the middle in a way that is like strong, that's bad.
Yeah.
But if you have a situation like Mike described, where you have both armies kind of sitting opposite each other with the middle intercept point in between them, and they're kind of taking like pot shots at each other, that's going to be a situation where either of you probably has to expose a unit to actually score the middle intercept point. And you don't generally want to do that early if you can avoid it.
Yeah.
It's actually super common in like high level intercept games for nobody to score in rounds 2 or 4, the center point.
Yeah.
That's not remotely uncommon.
Yeah, because it's not really important if you're, scoring the back end points. And the middle of the board in intercept generally ends up being a no man's land unless something's gone kind of wrong.
And clearly terrain is a big consideration there. Sometimes you have like a line of sight blocker that's close enough to that middle intercept point where you can like park a dude behind it to score safely. And if that's the case, if you have like an infiltrator or force user or something that can get there easily, then you're going to have a leg up in that situation, and you're going to be forcing your opponent to dislodge you by flanking the middle.
Yep.
Which then puts other things out of position. But generally, it's kind of like a World War I style. Who's going to be the first person to charge into no man's land kind of situation.
It's very much like you're playing chicken with your opponent. You're like, you're going to blink first. I'm going to blink first. Who talks first? You talk first. I talk first.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
All right, KP.
So I think this is probably the objective where deployment matters the least. Just because the objective doesn't really matter until turn 6. And I think the majority of deployment is kind of negotiating positions to get to whatever the middle point is eventually. Generally, your home KP is pretty safe unless you have like really not great terrain, or there's an R2D2 on the other side of the board, and that needs to be in your calculus because he screws up this mission pretty badly. And this is the objective where you need to counter deploy R. You should always try and counter deploy R2, but this objective you need to counter R2 like it's your job.
Yep, because this one is usually 2-1. So if your opponent has R2, that can be 2-2 pretty quickly, which could be a problem if you're a red player. So yeah, I mean KP is basically like a war of attrition for the first 5 turns. 4 turns.
I will say I know it doesn't come up a lot, but this definitely came up when I was playing my Highlander list. I had Bosk, so I had bounties. So actually, my second game, I ended up getting within 1 victory point because I bountied Rex, and I ended up getting him. And so any type of VP in addition, you definitely got to look out for.
100%.
Yep. All right. Speaking of recover, what's it recover? I know that was a flawless transition. Recover the supplies.
Yeah.
So I think on its face, recover plays a lot like intercept, unless there are specialty units involved. And what I mean by that is oftentimes you're both kind of sitting on your home boxes, and somebody needs either you're kind of like shooting each other across the middle box. Now, if your opponent has a unit with infiltrate or can like dive on the box and like pick it up and run away, very quickly, or has some sort of tricky shenanigans, that changes pretty dramatically. But I think as far as deployment goes in a standard game of recover, and you're probably not playing recover unless one of those units is involved.
Yeah, fairness. I was going to say.
I was going through this and I'm like, yeah, okay. I still sometimes live in a world where we're playing with like 5 objective cards, right?
Yeah,
4. Yeah. Sometimes my mind just automatically filters back to that. But if recover is in your deck now, you have a set of Mandalorians or something. So basically you need to set up to be able to shoot something on the box and hunt it down turn 1 pretty much immediately.
Yep.
Yeah, because either you're the person with the jump / infiltrate / force user unit, or you're the person that doesn't have that.
Yep.
Or it could be a mirror, and both players have something like that. But
yeah,
generally speaking, it depends a lot on terrain. Like if there's a line of sight blocker near the middle, and the person with the infiltrator / force user can just kind of put them there and like at their leisure grab the middle box, then that changes things, because then you need to flank that line of sight blocker. But more commonly, there's a little bit of like an open space around that middle area, and your opponent's going to have, even if it's a specialty unit like that, they're still going to kind of have to put something at risk to go grab it. And you need to be ready when that happens to clap them with a big shot or melee units or something. It depends a lot on what your list is.
I think as far as objectives go, timing and setting yourself up for like the precise strike is insanely important on recover. It's more important than on any other objective. The window that you're going to get if your opponent is playing correctly, it's going to be very, very narrow.
There's an alternative way to play this too, where depending on what your deployment is, you can kind of set up your boxes, your quote unquote safe boxes, close to their safe boxes, and then just kind of play in that area. I would do this a lot with Palpatine, actually, especially on like battle lines or disarray. my opponent would put a box, and then I would put a box across from it. And then my opponent would put their second box, and I would put my second box across from it. And I'd be like, all right, I got Palpatine. Let's play on a 3x3,
I do feel like that's less common now.
It is less common now because if you're running a list where that's like a good idea, most of those lists don't have R2 in them, which means you probably don't have battle lines in your list. Man, R2 is really bad for deck building variety. Sorry, tangent.
Kyle, I'm sorry. This is not the time to talk about R2.
I know, you're right. We can gripe about how much R2 restricts the list building phase on another podcast. I think if your opponent has one of those specialty units and you don't have the ability to do a lot of damage very quickly, like you don't have fire support or something like that, then you can give that strategy a shot where you're trying to grab one of their quote unquote safe rear boxes. But yeah, generally this is a play for the center box.
I find shenanigans are good with Recover the Supply. They seem to always do pretty well. I remember I used to run a Vader double bounty list, and you could do oh gosh, what the name just dropped out of my head. Oh, New Ways to Motivate both Boba and Bosk. So you could basically get 3 moves with Boba on the first turn, so he could move in, grab the box, and then move out like speed 3. So, I think that's always something to think about if you're putting Recover in, is just make sure you have a way to something that tricky up your sleeve to get that box.
Yeah, I mean, Recover is really the only objective where you can kind of take like the primary thing that both players are focused on and just run away with it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally what the objective is. Technically you can kind of do that with Bombing Run, but on Bombing Run, you need to deliver the bombs to your opponent's deployment zone. So it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, Recover often turns into like a slugfest over that center box very quickly. And if your opponent's in a better position to grab it, you need to have all your units positioned to like immediately chase that unit as aggressively and violently as possible.
I do think this is a good habit to be in generally, but having your snipers set up around line of sight blockers so that you can scope unit leaders is very helpful. Like having them in a position where they can abuse corners so that you can kind of like move them to a precise place to specifically pick one model out of a squad. When you're in deployment, you need to be cognizant of that, because that can really like shift a Recover game. That's one of the things that really can tilt it on its head. And if you can find a good place to deploy your snipers to abuse that, that's the objective that it's the most important of.
Yep. Yeah, and if you have a box and you have to move in such a way where that box is going to be like in view of a unit that can do that, make sure you just plop like a non-unit leader model out there further out than your unit leader, so that he doesn't get scoped and drop the box. All right, payload.
I hate this one.
Lob your army, move it with the payload. Yeah, I mean, this one does not seem very interesting to me.
Oh, it's so interesting though.
I mean, I think it's interesting to play. I don't think the deployment is super interesting.
I think it's one of the few ones that where, depending on the terrain, you could potentially make it so your opponent can't do it. Could never get it to the end point.
Yeah, so it's actually, even before we talk about deploying units, deploying your payload, you basically just want to put it as close to the middle as possible, wherever that is. Like the part of your deployment zone that's closest to the center of the table, that's where you want your payload.
So
most
I
of
think
the time.
I think on Disarray, there are situations where you can't actually score this objective.
And also hemmed in if you're red.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, like it might just be too far. Like you could move it 6 times and still not get there.
Yeah.
On certain deployments. So be mindful of that when you're dropping your payload. You don't want to kind of like you know, score an own goal by putting your payload too far away from the center and then having your opponent just pick a terrain piece that's far.
Which
So-
they're going to do, just to be clear.
Yeah. And when you're picking your opponent's terrain piece, make sure you got to think about the route clearly that your opponent has to take. And ideally you want that route to be through as much of an area of the table that you can control as possible. But you should also just measure the straight distance.
Yeah.
Because often there's something that's like significantly farther away and looks like it may be an easier route, but maybe your opponent has to move the payload 1 or 2 more times to get close enough to it. And it might be still a better choice. So payload can kind of toilet bowl sometimes, like breakthrough can,
Totally.
depending on where those objectives and stuff are. And if that's the case, you know, whereas breakthrough, you're measuring activations, with payload, you're measuring distance. Like if you can get your payload closer to your objective than your opponent, and you're in a situation like where you could have 2 ships passing in the night, then that's okay with you. But if you're not, then you want to kind of just have the payloads crash into each other. So, and don't forget the payload itself provides heavy cover when you're deploying.
It does. It also can displace your units, I believe, right?
Yes, it can displace units. So make sure you stay out of its way.
Yeah, that's kind of where I mean, not that that's likely to happen in deployment, but just be cognizant when you're like moving your units out of your initial deployment that you are not doing it in a way where you're taking suppression tokens and your opponent's moving your units, because that's bad.
Yep, real bad. All right, should we hit the R2D2 objective?
Sure.
This is really like 8 objectives because R2D2 is the deployment deck basically, but
All right. I mean,
right?
Yeah, I think your game plan here should just be to counter deploy R2. If you're playing against R2, just kill him as fast as possible. That's what I do. I actually don't hate playing against R2. I know a lot of people are like, oh my god, R2D2, he's terrible. He makes my life miserable. I think you just have to counter deploy him early and shoot him quickly. I know sometimes that's not possible but you need to put yourself in a position during deployment to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So that is not always possible, as you noted. The times where that's usually more difficult is like if you have a army, and this is a lot of droid and clone armies, where you kind of have to be in one spot.
Yeah.
If you end up with a long edge to long edge deployment like battle lines or disarray, or if you're like hemmed in as red player, there might be a situation where you kind of just have to like concede that R2 is going to score. And it might actually be easier to just win on the primary objective and just ignore R2 than having a unit or 2 off in the middle of nowhere chasing R2 down for the whole game and not contributing to the main fight. That's especially true if your opponent's list has a bunch of aggressive units in it, like Wookiees or, AA5s or Tauntauns, or something like that, because every unit that you pull away from the main fight is like another unit that you're not going to be able to respond to that with. So you definitely have to think about that too.
That's
Like,
fair. I definitely generally use take that clankers to just snap R2 off, just to like range 6 him as as fast as possible.
Not everybody has that card, man.
I agree. I just like I'm just I think you just need to go after him fast and hard, and sometimes that you're right. There are situations where it is better to just ignore them. I don't think that's super often though.
Yeah. I don't know how
You're
much.
not putting up much of a fight here.
I mean, my counter to R2 is to bid and put shortage deployments in my deck because I typically don't play lists with speeders in them or something else that can efficiently hunt down R2. So
Yeah, I mean, I also put short edge deployments in my text, so like
Yeah.
generally. So I'm with you on that. Often the R2 game is decided before it even starts, really. But I do think that like you should still try and snap him off as early as possible. Your opponent's gonna have to put him in a vulnerable position. He's slow. He's really slow.
he is. And it's sometimes you can kill him with, like, I've had success killing R2 with just the last first with a sniper.
Yeah.
You have to be intentional about it if you do that. You know, my last game at LSO, I made that plan and then I didn't like execute it in a way that was intentional.
Nope.
And it would have worked if I did.
Yep.
So
Yes, it would have. I think he got a repair off in between, right?
right, because I did not leave the I didn't at some point I lost my second model on a basically exposed them on an unnecessary shot and I lost my second model, so I wasn't able to cohere them back towards my commander to be within range 3, because then I would have been able to play ambush, give an order to them, you know, R2 was on 2 wounds, immediately shoot with my BX droid with a name token for lethal and then probably kill R2, but I couldn't give them an order. He pulled R2, he repaired, and then I couldn't kill him. So yeah, that can work too if you can do like a, you know, a last first with a long range unit, even if you don't have a lot of dice to work with. You know, he's only got 4 health. So
Yeah, I think my biggest advice is you can't like really hedge. You've gotta commit to killing
you
him.
have to commit to it.
Like if you don't commit and you like sort of try and halvesies it and it goes badly, you just like have done a significant amount of damage to yourself.
Right, because you probably have a unit somewhere out of position, you know, that's not contributing. That unit might even get picked off by the fast units that are probably in R2's list. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, gotta commit early and often.
Yep. All right, any final thoughts, gentlemen?
I don't think so. I hope people found this useful.
Yeah.
You know, as far as kind of getting started, and I think the beginning of the game is generally the most important. Making good decisions. The earlier you make good decisions, the more the repercussions from those decisions will be good or be bad, right?
Yeah.
So if you can make good decisions earlier, you will reap more benefits over the course of the game. That clearly starts in list building, so everybody should just play Rexstar. I'm joking mostly. I'm not playing Rexstar at the moment, so it's just for what it's worth. But you know,
I would say, you know, to that though, for maybe if you're newer and you're listening to us, like I would say this game is pretty forgiving as well. So like even if you do miss some of those like early good decisions that Mike's, there's still opportunity for you to kind of fix them along the way. You know, maybe not the whole game, but there's still some opportunities, you know, through round 3 and 4 where you could probably fix what you've done.
Yeah, I think it depends on who you're playing against.
Yeah.
For sure, right? Like I feel pretty confidently that if I miss a play against Kyle, I'm gonna have a bad day. And I would hope that he feels likewise. But like, you know, it just yeah, I think if you're the level of play that you're at, it is very variable when it comes to that, because a misdeployed unit turn 1 can the amount of people that I've like take that clankers on turn 1 or done whatever else that's in my toolbox and like just deleted a unit before it ever got to go.
Sure.
Strike does that too.
But I would say more often, a lot of times though, like I've caught people like they've misdeployed a unit. I'm like, oh yeah, here we go. This guy's dead. And then the dice are just like, nah, it isn't. You know, like that happens a lot too, where it's like I could roll 9 hits and then covered clones just roll all 9 blocks, and you're just like, yeah, all right, well, that
What
happens.
Jay is trying to say is that Empire has a hard time killing things.
That's not what Jay's trying to say at all. Don't put those words, some filthy words in my mouth.
I was just extrapolating.
All right, we've ragged on Empire too much this show. Only a handful of times, but too much. Poor Empire, just trying to exist,
I agree.
just trying to rule the galaxy.
Don't
With-
worry.
with
One of
peace.
these days we'll come back into power.
It was funny. I feel like we were playing a game the other day, and Jay like rolled like a full boat from an ATSD into like my Rebel Trooper squad, and I feel like I rolled like 6 blocks.
Yeah, you did. It was stupid, and I hated it. But that seems to happen more often than not. So it's just my life.
That's white dice because you expect them to fail, and most of the time they do. But sometimes they don't, and when that happens, those moments are super memorable.
It's like extraordinary. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then it's the same with opposite, but with red dice, right? When they get all blanks and you're like, but I'm rolling red defense dice. How is this possible?
yeah, this isn't
Yeah.
supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Space Marines still die.
They do. Yep, those 1s and 2s. They are literally 1/3 of the results on the dice, which is
I will say I'm very glad that Terminator saves are not in this game.
yes, same.
Like I'm many.
Yeah,
levels.
for those that don't play 40k, that's a 2-up on a 6-sided dice. So
Yeah, it would be a reverse Wookiee save, basically. Or
Yeah.
a reverse B1 save.
right, exactly. Which would be a tough thing to kill. Back
You
in,
would need a lot of Pierce.
back in second edition 40k, Terminators had a 3-up save on 2d6. Now, I think in that version saves were different. Like now, it's like either you ignore the whole save or you don't.
Sure.
Back in the day, they had like modifiers. You know,
Okay. Sure.
so it'd be like -1 on your save roll or something like that. So it's not like you could only ever just roll Snake Eyes and that kills your Terminator. If you shot him with a plasma gun, it would be like, -3 or something. So then but even still,
Yeah, it's interesting.
anyway. All right. Well, barring any
Super cool.
further final thoughts, we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Mike.
Me, Jay.
All right. Stay fresh, cheese bags.